So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is academic excellence. As the committee and possibly many of you in the public know, there is a citizens petition regarding academic excellence on the town meeting warrant. Interestingly, I learned that anyone can put a motion on the warrant if they can get 15 citizens to sign it. So that was news to me. But anyway, the petition looks to advise Wellesley Public Schools that academic excellence should take priority over all other programs, policies, and initiatives, and should be measured by our ranking in the U.S. News and World Report. So as I look at this, I think of two things. One is that academic excellence is one of our core values. In fact, it's the first one we list, but it's only one of four, and all are important, and all were developed through in-depth community engagement on what was important for Wellesley students. The second thing that I think about when I see this is the petition seems to be stemming from a narrative that WPS is lacking in academic excellence, and other than one magazine that ranks schools, I don't see any evidence of that lack. We're not perfect by any means, wouldn't want to say that, and we are constantly trying to improve the learning of all WPS students, but the academic rigor is there. And so we wanted to talk about that tonight. Dr. Lucier and his team have prepared some slides to walk through, and so I will turn it over to him, and then we can come back and discuss.
I appreciate that, Catherine, and I want to just provide a quick introduction to some members of the team who are going to be joining us. I think everyone knows Dr. Jamie Chisholm, principal of Wellesley High School, Dana Plunkett, who's our department chair for counseling at the high school, and Sandy Trock, who's our assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. Sandy or Catherine, you are correct. These conversations, even outside of the run-up to town meeting, I think have been percolating for some time in discussions that we've heard about and been part of in some cases around what academic excellence looks like, certainly in the context of the pandemic, but also as we have thought about our work now for more than a decade, thinking about what are the sort of 21st century skills that are needed. Public schools in general, I think, have been redefining themselves differently from traditional notions to meet the needs of a future that we're preparing kids for jobs that don't even exist today, right? So I think it's always a worthy conversation for us to be talking about academic excellence and rigor, which we know represent a big part of what we do in schools, but certainly not the only part. And I think that's a theme we're going to touch on at several points tonight. So I'm going to take a second and share my screen again, if you'll bear with me. And I think, as the committee knows, when we talk about excellence, of late, we talk about excellence not just individually, but in terms of equity and excellence. And we don't think these are opposites. We think these are two sides of the same coin, that we can't have excellence if it doesn't mean success for all of our students. And we know we haven't always had a track record of equitable outcomes for all of our students. And so that doesn't mean taking from some students and redeploying to others. It means thinking about a system in which we're supporting all students to grow, not just academically, but socially and emotionally as well. But I think our starting point tonight certainly is around academics, because we know that's been an area where there's been the most pointed conversation. And I think we want to address that directly and talk about what that looks like in WPS and at Wellesley High School in particular. So let me go through my slides here, or our slides collectively. We've heard now for some time about various rankings and where does Wellesley stand on the rankings. And so I think, as the committee knows, there's no one set of rankings. A number of media outlets have rankings. I think as there's been a recognition that they tend to attract viewers who I think maybe it's human nature that we're drawn to indicators of status to potentially reinforce the value of so many things in our lives, public schools being one of them. And certainly U.S. News and World Report is one of the better known areas of rankings, and the one that we probably hear the most about. In particular, why isn't Wellesley High School, and really it's been Wellesley high schools in general that have been the focus longitudinally of U.S. News and World Report. Only this past year have they gone beyond that in looking at other schools. And so, to wit, high schools have served as a proxy then for, the health of entire districts based on that calculus. So currently, or in 2021, Wellesley High School is ranked 26th in the state of Massachusetts on the U.S. News and World Report. And the top traditional public high school, and when I say that, I mean the schools that are 1 through 4, while they may be public schools, are a combination of charter schools and exam schools. And so we've selected here the highest traditional public school, which is in Harvard, Mass. The Bromfield School, which is number 5, Wellesley High School at 26. And just to put them side by side, we didn't cherry pick these data. These are the actual scorecards that are posted on the U.S. News and World Report rankings for 2021. And you'll see the categories here. The first one being college readiness, which is an aggregate of several factors. The Bromfield School's scorecard around college readiness is 58.4. For Wellesley High School, it's 67.6. The percent of students took at least one advanced placement exam. For Bromfield, the 69%. At Wellesley High School, 70% of students have taken at least one advanced placement exam. The percent of students who have passed at least one advanced placement exam at Bromfield is 67%. It's identical at Wellesley High School, also at 67%. Math and reading proficiency, both measured by the state MCAS exam. And these are results from the spring of 2019. They're always lagging. Of course, there were no MCAS in 2020 as a result of the pandemic. So these data are a little bit lagging from our more recent scores, which we'll highlight in just a moment. You can see math proficiency at Bromfield is 91%. Wellesley High was a couple of clicks lower at 89%. And for reading proficiency, Bromfield's at 94% and Wellesley at 85%, probably the larger area of gap between the two. For graduation rate, there's only a 1 percentage point difference, 100% to 99%. And of course, you see the overall scorecard ranking, 98.82 for the Bromfield School and 96.11 for Wellesley High School. I shared this side-by-side comparison with you just to give you some sense of the incremental differences between these two sets of results. And, that's something important. I think when intuition would say, my gosh, the difference between number 5 and 26 must be extraordinarily large. And in fact, if you go through all the schools in between, there are these really tiny, often decimal point differences between the schools. And so, here to think that's just over a 2 percentage point difference, I think really suggests, how tiny those differences actually are in the aggregate. So we at least wanted to start with a sense of, how the number 5 and the number 26 schools compare as an important reminder of any ranking system involves a set of weights, a set of decisions, and values that whichever media outlet happens to be using, and to put those things on a particular scale. And it's important to understand, are there really significant differences within that scale? And the reality is, for many of those schools, the actual differentials are very, very small indeed. But we do want to unpack each of these separate from any weighting from U.S. News or anyone else, and draw your attention to what these data look like. Now, these are going to be familiar to you. We annually come to school committee at different times of the year to present MCAS data and data on our secondary measures as well. But we thought it'd be important to bring some of these things together to show additional data on how Wellesley High students perform. So for advanced placement, and I know, you mentioned the petition for town meeting. and we saw a presentation for the first time last Wednesday at advisory. AP was really the thrust of that presentation, in a sense that advanced placement is really the sort of coin of the realm here, representing at least perceptions of what is the most rigorous set of course offerings for schools. And what you're seeing here is a longitudinal look at both the number of students who have tested in AP and the number of exams taken, and what those percent passing scores have been since 2013. And I think, as you'll see, both in terms of the number of students and the number of exams taken, we've seen exponential growth going from 299 students taking at least one AP exam in 2013 to this year, we have 419 students registered. So a pretty significant change, an increase in the number of students tested. Similarly, for the number of exams taken in 2013, that was 544. This year, in terms of registrations, we're at 864. So again, a significant increase in both of those categories over time. The percent passing, meaning scoring at least a 3 or above, very consistent over time. We saw a slight drop in 2020-21, as was seen really across the state as a result of the pandemic, but very, very high percentages of students with passing scores of 3 and above, regardless of the years that we're looking at there. So we thought it was important to, again, just shed some light on what our advanced placement program actually looks like. Taking that one step further, when we think about the number of courses that are actually offered in advanced placement at Wellesley High School, you can see in 2011, we had 18 courses. Today, 19 courses offered and actually running at 2 different things. Obviously, it depends on whether or not students are registering for those courses, if there's a critical mass to be able to do that. You'll see the enrollment, of course, over that time has also, as we've already noted, changed pretty dramatically. Something that I think may be less visible to the public related to our advanced placement program is that if we do not offer a particular course, we're actually able to offer students alternatives through virtual high school. And that's a great option sometimes for a student who may want to take a course that just doesn't fit in their schedule. And rather than not taking it, they have the ability to take an online advanced placement class. So you can see for 2021, as an example, we have 16 courses on site in advanced placement being offered, but we also have 6 courses through virtual high school for a total of 19 advanced placement courses currently running at Wellesley High School, either in person or virtually. I wanted to give Dana Plunkett, our counseling department, and just a second to maybe take a step back and just put advanced placement in a broader context. I know often conversations about AP involve college competitiveness and college admissions. Dana, I wonder if I could turn it over to you just to sort of say a few words about that and help put all of this in context from your perspective, because I know you deal with this in your department virtually every day.
Absolutely. And I'd like to also make one comment on the slide that we still have up about the historical WHS advanced placement enrollment. This is not a math error that 12 and 9 does not equal 18. The reason why those numbers for the total courses offered, just to add a little clarity, for our VHS classes, the numbers that you see there will include courses that we do not offer, but sometimes it might be a course that we do offer. However, for that individual student, their schedule did not permit them to take the WHS course, so they elected to take it through VHS. So for instance, if we have a student who wants to take AP Economics, and because their schedule did not allow them or afford them the ability to take AP Economics through WHS, they may be electing to take it through VHS so that they still can take that course and sit for the exam. But among the VHS classes that traditionally are courses that we don't offer that kids will take through VHS are things like art history, music theory, more advanced, sometimes AP Latin if we aren't running it because of students' level of interest. So the VHS classes always vary depending on not only WHS classes that don't support their schedule, but also areas, again, that we don't offer the courses in. So that's not a mathematical error. I wanted to clarify that. In terms of AP classes and how they factor into the college admissions process, however, there's a real debate or obviously a concern as to whether or not there's a certain number of AP classes that colleges are looking for. The most important thing from a college admissions perspective is that colleges are looking at a student's level of rigor in context in their individual school. So for instance, as an example, if Wellesley High School were to offer only 4 AP classes, a college admissions would look at that student and see to what capacity have they had the most rigorous courses that we offer. So if our most rigorous profile would be to take 4 AP classes, then they would be looking at that student. Did that student take 4 AP level classes, which is the most rigorous at our school? So they really look at a student's level of rigor in context of the school that they're attending, and not however many AP courses that they've taken. An example of why they look at in context of the school, not only the level of rigor, but all of the other wonderful things that our students participate in, is how admissions decisions are made, and that there really isn't a set number. So I pulled some information. For instance, 2 years ago at Harvard, we had a number of students admitted, and some ranged from having no AP classes and still being admitted to Harvard to having 6 AP level classes. So that range really speaks to the fact that it isn't just a certain number of AP classes that makes a student more competitive or desirable from a college. 2 years ago with our MIT admits, we had 1 student who was accepted having taken 3 AP courses. We had 2 students who had 5 AP courses and were denied admissions, and 1 who took 6 AP courses and was denied admissions. So again, colleges are looking for that level of rigor in the context of the school, as well as all of the other factors that they're looking for in the admissions process. So so certainly AP courses make them competitive, but that's not the whole thing that a college is looking for, nor are they looking for a certain number. It's always in context of the school that they attend, and what's the level of rigor that we provide, and is that student achieving at that level?
Thanks, Dana. So I want to pivot from advanced placement to other elements of that U.S. News scorecard, and that's around MCAS. And so our most recent MCAS data are from spring of 2021, last spring. And when we look at Wellesley High School and compare it to the top 10 high schools in Massachusetts, you can see we're only incrementally slightly behind Lexington High School. That Wellesley High fares extremely well with 88% meeting or exceeding standards on the MCAS exam. So we fare very well on the state math exam. Similarly, when we look at English language arts, Wellesley High School is tied for the top spot of the top 10 high schools in Massachusetts for ELA on the 2021 spring administration of the MCAS exam. So again, just another indicator about the performance level of our students that we think is noteworthy. Outside of the high school, I know that's where the bulk of the conversation has been. You'll see, and I know the committee has seen these data during our earlier MCAS presentation. Clearly, 2021, we're still dealing with the results of the pandemic, but it gives you a sense of grades 3 through 8 as well, where Wellesley compares to our comparable communities, as well as the high school, again, being placed within its context. And this is where that was, I beg your pardon, that was for ELA. This chart shows you where we are in math. And as noted, particularly for some of our middle school results this past year, we know we've got work to do. There were some particular grade levels acutely impacted by the pandemic. We had some key staff members who were out, and I know our middle school is attending to that. I would never want to use a single year's worth of data, particularly in the middle of the pandemic, and try to generalize that, more broadly to where we are. But, as Catherine noted, we are certainly not perfect. We'd be the first to say that, but we also want to put this all in the appropriate context as well. And this is where we are in science. Again, grades, science is not given each of the years of MCAS. It's grades 5, 8, and then at the high school level. And you can see that Wellesley, as a community and in the high school, fares very well in those comparisons. There are other indicators, and while these don't factor into many of the rankings, including U.S. News, these tend to be high-profile rankings as well. These are our mean SAT scores for Wellesley High School students. You'll see a similar trajectory of improvement in those mean scores for both reading and math, going from 601 being the mean score in 2016 to 651 in 2021, and you'll see a similar trajectory for math. When we look at our ACT scores, a different scale, very consistent with progress, incremental progress each year going back to 2012. I know this may be a little small, and this is always a challenging topic. I know there have been conversations about the degree to which the level of rigor and preparation is maintaining a level of competitiveness for students upon graduation going off to college. Now, there are great colleges that are not on this list. This is sort of a representative sample of colleges which will be familiar to many of us, but there are many others who are not on this list that we know our students attend to. Let me give you a second to look at this. Dana, any trends or lack thereof that you want to highlight here? Again, I know this is squarely in your bailiwick as well.
I think the most important thing to look at is some of the level of consistency in some of these colleges amidst an incredible surge in applications to many of these colleges over the past 2 to 3 years, particularly in light of many of these schools going test optional. Harvard, for instance, we're pretty consistent with our admit rates. However, even this year or last year, their overall admit rate was 5%. This year, it's going to be under 4%. And they've just this year seen a surge of applications up 42%. Yet we're pretty consistent in the number of students that we're getting into Harvard despite that surge. Boston University, which we have in the upper left-hand corner.
Go Terriers.
Go Terriers, their admit rate is 18%, and they've seen an increase in their early decision 1 and early decision 2 applications by 12.2 this year. So these numbers are staggering going up, yet we're still seeing consistent admit rates at these schools, if not increasing admit rates, because our students still remain highly competitive against some very competitive schools and some staggering admissions numbers.
I appreciate that, Dana. And here's just another cut of the data showing across these years from 2014 to 2021, what the average number of acceptances has been. Again, just another slice of some of the data you saw on the prior slide. So I think the story here is our kids continue to be competitive with all the schools traditionally that have been seen as sort of the high profile schools. And many schools that are not on here as well that our students attend and are terrific options, and our kids are highly successful at as well. So I wouldn't want anyone to assume, this is the be all and end all. It's certainly not. This is simply a sampling of schools.
I'd also like to sort of highlight just a bit about the test optional trend and where schools are seeing this, because as we saw in the previous slides, our students actually have remained relatively consistent in their performance on the standardized tests, whereas since 2018, a national average, scores have gone down 0.1% consistently since 2018. So our students are still holding pretty steady despite a national trend, which again, professionals in the field feel is largely due to just the disruption in school. And we expect to see those numbers going back up. But with regards to test optional and how students are faring, whether or not they submit test scores, on average, schools are seeing about half of their applicants submitting scores, and half, if not greater than applicants who are accepted, are ones who are test optional. So for instance, BU, 60% of the accepted students this year were test optional. So we're seeing, a trend where schools are really are using the testing to augment the academic excellence they're already seeing on their transcripts, but they're getting about 50% of students submitting test scores, and they're admitting 50, if not greater percent of those students who are test optional. So again, they're really looking at the academic rigor, and they're also looking at, all the other wonderful things that make our students competitive in order to gain admissions to these highly competitive schools.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. I know when we were at advisory presenting our budget to our colleagues last week, in the course of that conversation, there was a suggestion that, in the spirit of this discourse, wouldn't it be interesting to have an independent audit, of the high school for someone to come in? And of course, as I was listening, I was thinking, well, we actually just had that done just prior to the pandemic. It's called accreditation. And it happens, every 10 years with an extensive process. And as I transition to this next slide, I'm going to ask Jamie to say a little bit more about what that is, and how involved it is from his perspective as a principal, having to sort of manage all of that. But in particular, some of the accommodations that flowed from that I think are relevant to this conversation.
Thanks, David. I think a lot of the people in the committee know how extensive NEASC accreditation visits are. Certainly, we've come and talked to school committee about that in the past, but for those watching at home who may not, the NEASC stands for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and they are the most prestigious and oldest accreditation board in the world, really. They accreditate schools and colleges not only in New England, but also abroad. A lot of international schools are NEASC certified as well. So we engage in a year-long self-study before a team of 20 peer educators comes out and not only examines what we came up with as we comb through the different categories they tell us we have to. We don't get to choose which categories we go through and provide data for them. They tell us. But not only do they go through what we give them, when they show up, they ask for more data that we weren't ready for, and they ask us to pull more information that they might want. They observe classes, they interview parents, they interview students, they interview faculty members, and over the course of 3 days, they comb through us. I don't know how any better way to say that. And then they write a report. They do an interim report while they're there so that we have a sense of what they saw as they leave. But then we get a follow-up report several weeks later that's much more comprehensive and thorough. And what you see on the screen here in front of us are the overall accommodations from our 2019 visit, which feels like yesterday in some ways, and in other ways feels like a long time ago because of everything that's happened since then. But it is an extremely thorough and painstaking process, we take their recommendations and commendations very seriously, and we should highlight the school and community support, some of that which we see from the committee. We were highlighted for a wide variety of offerings at the high school, which I talked about last time I was here. With new courses and how important those are to kind of meet the needs of all of our students. And they highlighted our numbers and types of supports, knowing that many, many students these days are struggling with emotional challenges, and that we, they see that we take that seriously from a structural point of view, but also in our personal approach, which I appreciated. And they highlighted how much we valued higher order thinking and authentic learning opportunities. And this is by looking at assignments and syllabi, and by sitting in classes and listening to instruction and watching teachers teach at all levels. They tell us what classes they're going to. We don't tell them. So they observe everything they want to observe. And this is what they told us. So it's a very, very thorough process. And there's qualitative data and quantitative data in this process. David, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. It's only the 5th time I've heard that today. It's been a good day. I wonder if I could press on you, and particularly, I think many folks know, Jamie's been with the district for a very long time. But his roots are in the English department at Wellesley High School, and he led the department. Of course, he's now been principal for a good long while. Jamie, I know one of the questions we got was specifically around, advanced placement in particular in the humanities in the English department, and why isn't there an AP English course being offered? And I wonder if you could sort of connect some of these dots around the wide variety of offerings and the kinds of higher order thinking and authentic learning opportunities, and what that crosswalk is with those questions we often receive.
Sure. I think a lot of people would anticipate. The first thing I'll say is that, we've never taught AP English at Wellesley High School. That doesn't mean we couldn't, but it means we never have. And our English department has always been a crown jewel. And it's always been something we've been very proud of. Our students have come back for generations and told us how well they're prepared for college. I was talking to an alumni yesterday who told me the same thing, from a very prestigious Ivy League school. So let me just give you a flavor of what senior English, and that is traditionally where AP English is taught for 12th graders. Let me give you a sampling of what, I won't give you a sampling, I'm going to give you the whole list of what we currently teach for senior English, or what we hope to teach, and one class that we hope to teach next year, right? So the new class we added for next year is 21st century literature. The rest of the classes we are currently teaching for seniors, so they're options for seniors. So world literature, beyond the binary, diverse American voices, creative writing, humanities, evolutions, and English honors, ACP, and CP. That's before the options that some kids might choose to take a VHS class if they want to. And there are also some other electives that they can choose to take. So those classes that I just listed are all options for fulfilling your 4-year English requirement as a senior. It is a landscape that is rich and varied for our rich and varied interests of our students. And there is a lot of interest in those classes. We have wait lists for several of those classes. And so I don't know that we've had a great push for people asking us. I've never had people push me to come and teach AP English. I've not had faculty members come forward and propose a course. Traditionally, when we offer a new course or bring forward a course proposal to the school committee, it's because the department has brought it forward to us. And that's simply never happened. So again, obviously we, have, depending on the year, as was described earlier, many AP offerings at the high school. I think there's 19 in our course catalog, not always taught every year based on student choice. So we're not categorically opposed to it, but those are the reasons why we currently don't have it. And I'm not 100% sure, just giving you my opinion. And I've been close to that department for 23 years now. I'm not sure that the demand is there. But if it were, we could certainly offer it, but it hasn't been.
Jamie, I'd also add, I'd also just add, just as context later, and then we'll certainly answer your question. Out of the past 10 years, students who've elected to take one of the AP English tests or AP English courses through VHS, only 4 out of the past 10 years has students elected to take AP Literature, and 1 out of the past 10 years have they wanted to take Language and Composition. So these courses have been available through VHS, but we've seen very low interest in students taking their English through the VHS in order to take those AP classes. So I just wanted to put that in context.
I just wanted to say, as someone who attended Wellesley High School and began my English teaching career at Wellesley High, and then went on to be an AP English literature teacher in another district, I imported, for those who are concerned about rigor, I imported rigor from what was then English 41, which was an honors senior English. I took assignments. I was surprised at how not rigorous the AP course I walked into was, and took assignments and texts from the Wellesley High School program and brought it with me to AP. And then that syllabus that I taught went on to be approved by the College Board as an official AP syllabus, and I wound up being an AP reader for years. So if the concern is really around academic rigor, I can assure our community that without offering AP, the Wellesley High School English department is absolutely offering that level of challenge and critical thinking and writing instruction.
I'd just also say, I know that, sorry, David, I'll just one more point.
Please.
I want to make that, one member of the community I was having a conversation with, mentioned that, she understood that pedagogically, we, in fact, are doing some great things in our English department, but that perhaps, this is the way the game is, and this is the way the world works in college admissions. And that would be the reason for choosing to move towards AP. And I'd just say that that's never been the way that Wellesley High School has operated. We want our students to be great learners. We want them to love learning. We want them to, we want academic excellence to look like they study because they can't help it, because they fall in love with it. And we believe that will bring the recognitions and the honors that they regularly earn. So that's sort of how we've operated in the past, and we still believe that's the right way to go.
I would also add to that, there seems to be a slow trend, and I'm in the process of gathering sort of more factual data that we can certainly present to the community, but we're starting to see a slow trend of schools moving away from offering AP courses in order to provide a more enriched, challenging curriculum, such as Leda, was commenting on how she took from an already rigorous honors level program to augment the AP courses. There is a slow movement away from discontinuing AP courses at schools, and in turn offering a much more enriched and rigorous course load that will actually prepare our students better for colleges. And colleges are acknowledging that these courses are actually far more preparatory for what students will achieve at the college level. So it's a very slow trend. We'll certainly come forward with sort of a little bit more hard data for folks who will obviously understandably want to know that. But it definitely is a trend heading in that direction, as is moving away from standardized testing in general. We're kind of seeing that really isn't indicative or providing our students with what they need for college in our greater ability to create a curriculum that does provide a much more enriched experience for them.
Yeah. And not to belabor the point, I think sort of connecting these dots here, we're about finding spaces for kids to thrive, right? For kids to find pathways and niches, and rigor can be defined in many ways in addition to AP. We certainly have a strong, vibrant advanced placement program, I think, as we've already gone through, with the data. And we have a rich array of courses that allows kids to pursue passions in creative and innovative ways. I'm so proud of Jamie's leadership in bringing Evolutions online and thinking about a very different way of teaching that has become a lifeline for kids who want to engage, but may not want to engage in ways that are more traditional. And where would those kids be if we didn't have these course offerings? I think about the importance of the Diverse American Voices course and how that's been particularly important, to our students. So, I don't think the answer here is narrowing our curriculum and trying to push kids into a program for the sake of an external group's rankings. We're focused on kids. We're not focused on rankings. And that's something that we take pride in. I think it's consistent with our core values. I think it's consistent with our history as well. Let me leave our local story though for just a second, because we also are uniquely positioned to have some international benchmarking. And I think, as the committee knows, about 5 years ago, Wellesley had a chance to participate as a school district in the PISA exam. For those that don't know, PISA is probably one of the most well-known international exam, extremely rigorous exam that developed countries participate in around the world. It's offered every 3 years with a random sampling of 15-year-olds from countries. So typically people would see PISA results in the news in terms of the United States and how the United States fares against Germany and Singapore and Finland and Japan and so forth. There was a sense that wouldn't it be interesting to allow local school districts to participate as their own subset, to not only compare themselves with the United States as a whole, but also to have that same opportunity for an international comparison. And so we thought that would be actually a very useful activity for us. So we've now participated in this twice. Again, this is a random sampling of 15-year-olds, so some 9th, some 10th graders in the spring in each year. These were the results that we reported from May of 2019. This is in reading, and our mean score for the students who participated was 564. As you can see, we fared very well compared to the United States, but I know it's a little small on the screen. You can see that our mean score was actually higher than the mean score of every country who participated in the exam in reading, including Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, Finland, and so forth. So that's reading. In mathematics, our mean score was 590, where we did very well. And again, the next closest mean score was Singapore at 564. And you can see the mean scores for each of those countries in mathematics. And again, not an absolute fair comparison comparing, Wellesley with our socioeconomics, et cetera, to a random sampling of these other countries. But again, I think it still gives us some sense of how we're faring here. In science, our mean score was 559. You can see the next country with a closer mean score just below us was Singapore at 556. So in our budget proposal for FY23, our trajectory in participating in this exam was interrupted by the pandemic. Our hope is that we're going to continue to participate maybe every other year in this exam as a way not just to have local data or even national data, but to have some international benchmarking as well. These reports are actually incredibly rich in detail and breaking apart these scores. So not just thinking about reading scores, but thinking about the kinds of readers that actually exist, which have given us some very useful feedback as well. The bottom line is Wellesley High and our students, for a random sampling of those students for a test they cannot prepare for, have fared extremely well. So just more evidence of the level of rigor that exists within our district and at Wellesley High School in particular. This next slide, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole just given the time, but I know there have also been conversations about the degree to which our trajectory of enrollment may or may not be connected to any elements of this conversation. And there's no question we've seen an acute drop in enrollment as a result of COVID. Of course, we were already on a more than a decade-long trajectory of declining enrollment, which we had forecast previously. But this chart, which actually, I'm not sure if this was Melissa Martin or Sharon Gray who had prepared this for our building conversations, really takes our, over decades, our enrollment for WPS. And, what you see here really are, over time, long demographic sweeps where, we can go to 1964 when we had 12 elementary schools, right? And see that enrollment drop precipitously, all the way down to, school closures that began in the early 80s when 4 schools were closed and we were down to 6 elementary schools, going all the way down to, I think, about 1987. Very good year. And then we started to see that incline and that enrollment increase once again up until about 2008, 2009. And then, we're starting to see that decline again. My only point in including this slide is just to showcase that our community has gone through pretty significant trends over time where we've seen dramatic drops in enrollment that have been followed by periods of increase, followed by drops again. In all fairness, I think none of us really knows if any long-term trends are being newly established or broken as a result of the pandemic coming out of this. We know that the last 2 years have created significant changes in the workforce. And I'm not sure we know where the dust is going to settle and what that's going to mean for where people choose to live. Obviously, affordability becomes an issue. Wellesley remains one of the most expensive zip codes in the state of Massachusetts. So our property values have certainly not changed, even at a time of declining enrollment. So there are many factors that are involved around enrollment that are really not based on performance. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be attentive to that going forward. But I did want to highlight that because I know there have been conversations around enrollment. So then finally, I do want to transition to something beyond just sort of academic excellence and to really put these pieces together and to give Sandy Trock, our assistant superintendent, a chance to provide you just with an overview of some of the incredible work that's been happening, even with all the challenges we've been facing this year in Wellesley Public Schools, about the degree to which we continue to dig in and think about how we can continue to improve, better serve students, not just academically, but also thinking about their social and emotional well-being and so many other factors here, and how we are really focused like a laser on those improvements. So with that, Sandy, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. Thank you, David. So as David has shared already at the top, equity and excellence for all is our lens on the district goals as we learn and collaborate together. So we think about equity and excellence as going hand in hand. And I think you'll see that throughout the number of professional developments and supports for students that we'll touch upon briefly this evening. So everything we're doing, whether it's academic or social emotional, equity focused, again, professional development, we're entirely focused on the instruction, support, and success of all of our students. Academically, next slide. Academically, in schools, leaders and teachers have been using the data from the MCAS and local assessments, as well as examination of units that we taught during the pandemic months, to adjust units and lessons to ensure that students are meeting their standards and have the appropriate time and development to learn, understand, and be independent with those skills. We're also taking a closer look at pre-K-12 mathematics, and David touched upon this. Although all academic areas are extremely important, we're highly focused on the essential concepts and skills in math as part of rigorous core instruction. And our goal is to ensure that all students are secure in their benchmarks at the end of each grade level. The FY23 recommended budget also proposes adding math specialists at the elementary level to fortify our instruction for students. Next slide. In terms of academic support, all schools are increasing their use of data to inform instruction. All schools have student support teams, or sometimes called SSPs, which helps schools closely monitor student performance and progress based on expected benchmark targets, so we can reteach or extend student learning accordingly. We're also sharpening up our district curriculum accommodation plans, or DCAPs, at all level. And these are accommodations that students need and can receive in general education to help on-ramp learning, to help students more effectively access the content. For K-5 math intervention, we focused our Title I funds on math at the elementary level and also used our local funds to ensure that math paraprofessionals are in each school working under the direction and in concert with our math specialists as a team to help improve student learning. We'd like to thank the school committee who voted to support funds for academic tutoring K-12 in English, or I should say actually, yes, K-12, English, math, science, and all levels. It's an important pandemic recovery effort that will be forthcoming at all levels to support students with real-time academic support for areas where we feel they need that strategic support. That tutoring will be based on student performance and individual student academic needs as defined by classroom data and classroom performance. And last on this slide, we are exploring digital adaptive assessment tools that help us provide real-time feedback on student performance relative to expected concepts and skills. So we're able to look at that data relative to the grade level, other similar districts, and student performance to other students nationally. The district's also taking a look at data dashboards to help us visualize and analyze student performance to help us inform instruction and make important decisions. Next slide. We are working together on professional learning, have some exciting PDs underway, professional developments. At the district level, we're focused on multi-tiered systems of support. So what does that mean? It's a conceptual and structural framework for developing systemic coherence of standards, instruction, common assessments, interventions, and enrichment. So breaking that down, we've been engaged in extensive professional development this year with our leaders and our teachers. We're defining core, strategic, and intensive levels of instruction and the associated supports for students. We are building school leadership teams. We're learning about professional learning communities, revising master schedules to support and coordinate instruction, intervention, and enrichment. We're also designing common assessments and learning about evidence-based instruction and grading practices. Another initiative that we're working on through professional development is high expectations teaching. And high expectations teaching actually follows the work of John Safier from Research for Better Teaching. We've been really fortunate to learn from John directly. And this is a method of rigor, growth mindset, and culturally proficient instruction to improve student achievement. So for example, high expectation study groups were held across the schools this past fall and winter with great energy and enthusiasm by teachers. And in fact, tomorrow, John Safier and I are meeting with teachers to debrief and receive their feedback about how those study groups went and what they're hoping for continued training in the future. The district is also running a high expectations academic course for all leaders right now this winter and spring, and we're looking at continuing that into the fall. And so all principals, department heads, central office, and more are learning the high expectations methodology for rigor, growth mindset, and culturally proficient instruction. This is an area we will absolutely be continuing. For social emotional learning, this is equally key to us to academics. So one area that the superintendent and central office team are taking a look at are investing in a pre-K-12 social emotional learning audit of our system in order to identify the strengths of our social emotional learning programming, as well as areas to grow and continuously improve. We're in the process of examining SEL curriculum selections or social emotional learning curriculum selections for pre-K through 5 that teach pro-social skills for students in a researched and evidence-based way, while also upholding our commitment to anti-racist and anti-bias teaching and instruction. Open Circle has been our social emotional learning curriculum for pre-K through 5. However, Open Circle is no longer sustaining their program. So while we have many teachers trained and we own those materials and we continue to teach those lessons, the district is enhancing programming at the pre-K through 5 level and moving ahead with responsive classroom training for teachers. Responsive classroom is a positive pro-social instructional approach to teaching social emotional learning to young students. Thanks to the school committee for approving funding for training. We anticipate up to 90 educators pre-K through 5 will be trained this March and June 2022. Also, middle school and high school are continuing to employ the advisory model and continues to be a successful model to help us focus on a climate of care as a top priority. Everyone is supporting students emotionally as our first priority. And the FY23 recommended budget proposes adding school adjustment counselors at the pre-K 5 level. We continue to use Panorama to support leaders with school-based equity planning. A training for leaders was just held. Data analysis is underway and utilized for planning by all schools. Equity continues to be the core of our work in social emotional learning, and each school has numerous dedicated professional development afternoons led by our equity facilitators, dedicated to furthering our understanding and practice around equity. We've used the book Culturally Responsive Instruction in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond as a study tool, who was our keynote speaker at our November Professional Development Day. And once again, we'd like to thank the school committee who approved funds for our 5th grade Hale reservation trip. These funds are covering the registration fees and bus transportation costs for our 5th graders. This item rose to the top of our list for reasons of equity and pandemic recovery. And we felt it was critical for students to have this special and important curricular opportunity to help culminate their elementary education and before they transition to middle school. So as next steps, we'll continue to take a look at how we can weave these into our budget. Next steps. So in summary, we're looking to update our strategic plan to reflect our mission of equity and excellence. We're focusing on equity for all, as we discussed, as a lens on our district goals, or as we like to say, all means all. Enhancing academic programming by strengthening the core instruction that all students receive, the supplemental supports that additional instruction students receive on top of the core, and intensive instruction for students who need it in addition to the core and the supplemental instruction, and of course, enrichment for students and extensions. We're looking to support social emotional learning through the pieces we've talked about: curriculum, instruction, professional learning, and investments in personnel. And we are committed to monitoring our efficacy through continuous improvement. David, I'll turn it back to you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Sandy. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I appreciate the committee's indulgence. I know that we covered a lot of ground here. This is a big topic for us. And at this point, we'll conclude and certainly look to your guidance or answer any questions you may have about next steps.
I wanted to say thank you so much for that. With the conversations that have been happening in the community, I am constantly thinking, well, what do you mean by it? Excellence in education. And I think, Jamie, that slide you had with the commendations from NEASC to me really encapsulated it. It's not test scores, APs. I mean, those reflect the successes we're having, but an excellent education both asks so much more of our students and provides so much more to them. So I'm really glad, that it wasn't, yes, you showed us the numbers that helped us see how some of those, metrics demonstrate excellence, but really that it's about much more than that, I think is key. One of the ironies, I think, too, is that some of the people are saying you need to pay more attention to academics so the rankings go up. I'm pretty sure one of the things we're also ranked on is the equity in terms of student achievement across demographic groups. So I think that is actually one, I'm pretty sure US News uses that and looks for any discrepancies. And I know that that's something we're working on as a district. So even the work that folks who want us to just focus on academics maybe are not supportive of, in fact, will have the side effect perhaps of driving our rankings. But thank you for that really thoughtful conversation and presentation about all the pieces that go into making WPS a wonderful place for all of our students.
I appreciate that, Lita. And, we could have gone in so many different directions tonight, and all would have been worthy. One thing we didn't talk about is what's not included often in rankings. And they're incredibly important and valuable pieces of our high school experience. We have performing arts and visual arts departments second to none. We have an athletics program that has typically the highest participation of any school in the state of Massachusetts. If you talk to graduates from Wellesley High School and ask them, what were their most meaningful experiences in high school, some of them may identify classroom experiences, but often they're going to point to experiences elsewhere in the high school that are so important in complementing what happens in classrooms. And we don't want to lose sight of that. We want to be a high school that has a rich set of offerings, because our goal is not just to prepare kids for college. College is likely a reality for many of our students, even if not directly following high school. And yet our vision, our sight line is much broader in thinking about preparing kids for life, and wanting kids to, as Jamie said, have had experiences falling in love with a novel, in a book, finding a passion, experimenting. I know that high school, as they talk to incoming ninth graders and their families, that's the advice year in and year out. Take a chance, try something new, stretch yourself, fail. These are all things that I think are essential to what a well-rounded education is, that will provide kids options. And, that path has more zigs and zags than it ever has before, which is absolutely wonderful. That's as it should be, because our kids come to us in all shapes and sizes with all sorts of interests and strengths. And we want to provide opportunities for those kids to be known and to succeed and thrive. And I think narrowing that work, is sort of antithetical to that mission that is deeply held by everyone here.
Yeah. Can I also add a comment, David, to that? Just because I know a
Please.
concern that was raised was the fact that, when we are submitting applications on behalf, or transcripts and things on behalf of our students, we included a high school profile to help our colleges understand sort of our school in context of how students experience it. And while we do certainly have a lot of statistical information on data with AP and standardized testing scores, we also have a very robust sort of section about all of those other aspects that make Wellesley a highly competitive but also varied school program, particularly in our fine and performing arts. The level of participation we have in sports is second to none, with very competitive teams. Our enrichment programs and activities, as well as just a stellar faculty who hold, 94% of them hold master's degrees or higher. So these students are also learning from some highly educated and very professionally developed faculty to really give them that enriched experience. So our profile almost every year gets vetted through a number of college admissions people to make sure that they have the information about our school, so that they can put our students in context and realize that it is absolutely about academics, but it's also about really developing well-rounded students who are engaged in their education and engaged in their personal journey to find levels of interest and activity that they really can shine.
I'd also say, having been involved for a long time now, 25 years, I started out, my kid was in kindergarten, being on the school committee the first time, and I knew nothing about the high school at all back then. I mean, that was, I remember running for election then and saying, how am I going to answer any of these questions about the high school? And what I was able to do over the next 25 years is learn a lot about it. And I, from what I can say, it's been a very, it's been a trajectory going up, not down, over the last 25 years of basically making sure that kids, things that David has talked about before, and Jamie, making sure kids connect with an adult. We've always made sure that happens, making sure that there are all sorts of different connections that a kid can have, through sports, or if somebody's interested in human development or teaching, pottery, you know, all the electives that we were able to expand last year. And kids have always, we've always been cognizant that some kids would only come to school particularly to find that niche they were looking for. And it's a very broad-based school. It's for everybody. And it's like, you know, and I'm just, you know, here to say on my last night, I'm very proud of it.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I was trying to think a little bit and actually first, thank you for pulling this together, David and Jamie and Dana for being here. It gives us a lot of good context, but I was really trying to think of how does a narrative like this get started? And I think a couple things. I think it stems in part from communications. We've been all along the past, you know, I don't know how long, I've been here for 20 years, and it's always been schools that are academically excellent. And we've been focusing energy on changing some other aspects and enhancing other aspects of our school because the academics are there. So we haven't been talking very much about the academics. They're just happening in the background because that's what we do. Like, that's the core of what we do. So I think, you know, I think it makes sense to make sure that we don't just talk about the new initiatives in, you know, social emotional learning or DE&I work, but we talk about the stuff that Sandy talked about tonight about how are we improving our teaching methods and how are we teaching kids, and what new STEM classes are we adding, and highlight some of those things as well as all of the other work that we're doing. And along those same lines, I think it's important that we make sure that we're giving kudos to our kids for their academic achievements as well as their athletic and artistic ones. You know, the honor roll used to be printed in the Townsman. I'm not sure why that stopped, but maybe that could be something that could happen again. You know, and when there are academic related events, there could be, you know, articles in the Townsman or the Wellesley report, just like there are when our amazing musicals happen or our concerts or our athletic teams win state titles. You know, and just try and make sure that we're promoting all the different things that the high school does. So that was just sort of some thoughts about how to make sure that we're getting the messages out to the community about all the stuff that we're doing.
I would just add sort of along those lines that, you know, I think, and of course it is related to the pandemic, we haven't been able to publish our annual progress report, which, you know, I actually was part of the team that was involved in helping to design that. And for me, it's a great way for us, and it's something that is published and shared with the entire community. It's really a great reminder as to what is the strategic plan that the schools are following, and how do we think we've done executing against that strategic plan. And of course, a lot of discussion went on a few years ago around the profile of a graduate, and that was very much, you know, it involved lots of members of the community. And I can remember having those discussions about, well, academics needs to be, you know, one of the skills and the competencies that we want to have in the profile of a graduate. And there was a lot of discussion around it. And in the end, it didn't end up being part of the profile of a graduate. It was things like, you know, creativity, critical thinking, communications, problem solving. Those are the things that as a community, we all acknowledge are very critical to succeeding, not just at college, but in life, you know, as David was mentioning earlier. So it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to continue to share the narrative through the progress report, but I know that you know, there'll be an opportunity going forward, especially with the forthcoming strategic